Peace be upon you. Throughout the Quran, we have several references to messengers being sent to a people with signs or miracles, and many among his people reject the signs in the messenger. They often prefer alternative explanations other than God, magic, coincidence, sleight of hand. The person you see pictured above is Rashad Khalifa. He discovered a hidden numerical code within the Quran, code 19, but then later on claimed he was a messenger of God. Understandably, there was a lot of resistance to this claim, lots of accusations of lying, and accusations of misconduct on Rashad's part for making such a claim. And of course the most common objection is, I thought Prophet Muhammad was the last messenger? Additionally, Rashad discovered something within the Quran, which was given to Prophet Muhammad, so this is not Rashad's miracle. Rashad did not come with miracles or signs, right? So how could he be a messenger of God? Here is the Quran saying the Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet. If you notice, the Quran calls him both a prophet, Rasul, and messenger, Nabi, but in this verse it said he was a messenger of God, and the final prophet. It said he was the last prophet, but why didn't it also say he was the last messenger of God? The Quran's text thus opens the possibility that Prophet Muhammad wasn't the last messenger, even though he was the last prophet. I've linked in the description an article explaining the distinction between a prophet, Nabi, and messenger, Rasul. Now, it is commonly argued that Rashad Khalifa could not have been a messenger because he did not come with any miracles. He only discovered Prophet Muhammad's miracle, code 19, which is embedded in the Quran. As it turns out, code 19 also has features and signs external to the Quran that serve as the miracles associated with Rashad Khalifa. Let's discuss some of them. Rashad Khalifa discovered code 19 in 1974 and this year was coded 3 times. The first and only mention of 19 in the Quran is in chapter 74, 1974. Chapter 74 is also titled The Hidden Secret and this secret is about code 19. This will be discussed in future videos God willing. The geometrical value of the first verse of chapter 74 also happens to be 1974. The discovery of code 19 is exactly 1406 lunar years after the first verses of the Quran were revealed, and 1406 is a multiple of 19, but, more specifically equals 19 times 74. And as a side note, the first verses of the Quran revealed were 19 verses Quran chapter 96. 3 different pointers to 1974. 1. The geometrical value of the first verse of chapter 74 is 1974. 2. Chapter 74 has the first and only mention of 19. 1974. Code 19 was discovered 1406 years after the revelation of Quran. 1406 equals 19 times 74. Rashad wrote a book in 1973, where he was speculating but not really sure about the significance of these mysterious letters, and only in early 1974 did he discover the 19-based code surrounding these numbers. It just so happens Rashad discovered this at the right time, where there are 3 different pointers in the Quran to this date. When humans are presented with this miracle, what will they say? This is human-made. Rashad did this by himself. They would reject God's signs and attribute them to human workings. Now, as you know, Rashad Khalifa discovered code 19 by plugging verses into his computer program, and when he published these findings, he titled his book The Computer Speaks. This is indeed another miracle. The computer of Rashad spoke. Think about it, 1970s computing power was so weak that even modern college-level calculators have more computing power than that. And Rashad's computer spoke to him the correct counts of everything. Even before Rashad knew about the 2 false verses, his computer just so happened to give the right count. He didn't get the right counts when he did it by hand, but his computer somehow produced the right counts, which he later discovered through looking at ancient Quranic manuscripts. See figure above. In Rashad's own words, the computer did not pay any attention to the data that I fed into it. It gave us the correct count of the word Allah despite the erroneous feeding. Now you can claim, this wasn't a miracle. It was sleight of hand. It was Rashad's own fabrication and invention. But so do others throughout the Quran who, when presented with God's miracles, they disbelieved and called them human-made, magic, sleight of hand, a computer with limited computing ability just so happened to speak all the right numbers even when Rashad himself was not able to reproduce those counts initially. In response to a miracle, the Quran informs us time and time again that people would just claim this was not a miracle, just a sleight of hand. Next, another element of the miracle of Rashad is how several things surrounding him happen to be associated with the number 19, beyond what we should expect by random chance. He was born on November 19, 1935. The root word of his name, Rasada, is mentioned in the Quran exactly 19 times. Rashad's mosque has the address of 739 East 6th Street. 7 plus 3 plus 9 equals 19. That mosque was built in the year 1919. That mosque is off of Highway 19. The zip code of that mosque ends in 19. 85719. Let's take a closer look at the zip code. It should be noted that a 5-digit zip code contains 3 separate numbers. The first number is a 1-digit number corresponding to the national area. The second number is a 2-digit number corresponding to the sectional area. The third number is a 2-digit number corresponding to the delivery area. So in the zip code of the mosque Rashad founded we have 3 numbers: 8, 57 and 19. 57 is widely recognized as significant per Quran since it corresponds to half of the total chapters of the Quran. Now what is the significance of the number 8 in that zip code? Amazingly, the number 19 happens to be the 8th composite number. When we multiply the numbers within Rashad's full zip code we get 2 multiples of 19. By itself this may not seem significant since that zip code contains 19. But if you remove the 19 and just multiply the others, you will still get a multiple of 19. But what makes this really significant is when we mirror the full zip code with the parcel number of Rashad's mosque. When we do the same calculation on that number, we also get a multiple of 19. Also, remember how the zip code had the number 57 which corresponds to half the chapters of the Quran? The land parcel number has 114 corresponding to the full number of chapters of the Quran. Poetically, the number that contains 57, half the chapters of the Quran, it produced 2 multiples of 19 instead of 1 as shown above. 57 times 2 makes up the total number of verses in the Quran 114, indicating the deliberateness of God's signs. Now, as you know, Rashad Khalifa was assassinated in the 31st of January 1990. As it turns out, the number of days he lived from his birth to his assassination is a multiple of 19. Even on top of a multiple of 19 and the number of days Rashad lived, 19,798. It just so happens that Quran chapter 19 has 798 initial verses, corresponding to the number of days Rashad lived, 19,798. Amazingly, 19 years after Rashad's assassination, the culprit was identified and arrested. 19 years. Why 19? The culprit was sentenced on the 19th of December. Again, why 19? Let's take a closer look at the date of assassination, the 31st of January, 1990, when written in the most common dating convention of day, month, year, is a multiple of 19, as shown above. But look closely at the multiple of 19 of the date of assassination. It is 1230 which happens to be the geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa. And then look at the next number in that multiple, 1327. Notably, the first verse of chapter 19 of the Quran is the 1230th initial verse and the last verse of chapter 19 is the 1327th initial verse. On top of that, recall that 1230 corresponds to 2 things. 1. Geometrical value of Rashad Khalifa and 2. The first verse of chapter 19 being the 1230th initial verse. The 1327 corresponds to 1. The last verse of chapter 19 being the 1327th initial verse and 2. Quran chapter 13 verse 27, which says that those who disbelieve will claim that a miracle did not come down with God's messenger. If you had witnessed this miracle, explained in this video, that was sent down with Rashad Khalifa, a messenger of God, and you reject it, you will be one of those disbelievers in that verse. And yet there is more. Quran chapter 19 verse 19, the only chapter verse sequence that has 19 twice, has 31 letters and has a geometrical value of 1990, corresponding to Rashad being assassinated on the 31st day of 1990. More on those numbers 1230 and 1327. If you sum up the digits, 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 0 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 7, it adds up to 19. And even more intensely, if you add all the digits of the multiple of the date Rashad was assassinated, 1 plus 9 plus 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 0 plus 1 plus 3 plus 2 plus 7, you get 29. Critically, Rashad was stabbed 29 times and there are 29 initial chapters in the Quran in total, and it was Rashad who discovered they have multiples of 19 in their initial counts. To recap so far, Rashad discovered code 19 in the year 1974, which was 1406 years after the first 19 verses of the Quran were revealed. 1406 equals 19 times 74. The only mention of the number 19 in the Quran is in chapter 74, 1974. The geometrical value of the first verse of that chapter, which calls the code 19 phenomenon the hidden one, is 1974. Improbably, we have 3 separate pointers to 1974. Then we discovered that Rashad's birthday was November 19th, that the root word of his name is mentioned in the Quran 19 times, that his mosque address digits add up to 19, that his mosque was built in 1919, that it is also off of Highway 19, that its zip code ends in 19, that both its zip code and parcel numbers have significance to 19 in the chapters of the Quran, that Rashad lived a number of days that were a multiple of 19, 19,798, and that Quran chapter 19 has 798 initial verses, that the culprit, who assassinated Rashad, was arrested 19 years after the murder, that he was sentenced on the 19th of December, that the date of Rashad's death itself contains several numerical codes including a multiple of 19, Quran 19, 19 containing code corresponding to the date of his death, that the digits of that multiple corresponds to the 29 times he was stabbed and more critically to the 29 initial verses that Rashad discovered make up the code 19. In response to these signs of God, what does the Quran remind us the disbelievers will say? That this is magic, that this is sleight of hand, this is human-made, this is just a coincidence. Just as the Quran describes throughout history, denial of God's miracle, attributing it to the messenger's doing and not divine, hand-waving it all, seeking alternative explanation like magic or coincidence or sleight of hand. Now you can say, Rashad did this or this was all a coincidence, and yet again, just as the Quran describes throughout history, denial of God's miracle, attributing it to the messenger's doing, not being divine, hand-waving it as coincidence and seeking alternative explanations beyond God. If you continue to say Rashad did not come with miracles or signs from God, despite observing those signs above, then you have done what others have done to other messengers of God, denying the miracle, attributing the miracles to the messenger himself, asking for more impressive miracles, when God, repeatedly throughout the Quran, only gives just enough signs because this is meant to be a test for you. All the disbelievers prefer alternative explanations for the miracle other than God. Quran 74:35 tells us this code 19 is one of the great miracles, and the messenger of the covenant, Rashad Khalifa, comes down with these signs. And just as the Quran describes happened to other messengers all throughout history, just like them, Rashad was rejected, ridiculed, despised and then eventually killed in the most horrendous manner. The people rejected the miracle of 19, one of the greatest miracles, when it was presented to themselves right in their eyes, and then dare to ask for a miracle, and then they will wonder, why wasn't a miracle sent down with Rashad Khalifa? Just as Quran 13:27 warns, the Quran reminds us that one only becomes a disbeliever when the message signs are presented to them and then they reject God's signs or God's messenger. You are never held to account for information you do not know and would not be considered a disbeliever if you never encountered the information to reject in the first place. Now that God has willed this information reach you, you are now held accountable. This is God's test for you. You observed these signs, and you disbelieved in them. Repent immediately and submit to God. Now, some may need to hear it from God himself to know that Rashad was a messenger, and as a mercy from God, he has provided a major hint at Rashad being a messenger. As you know, the root of Rashad's name is mentioned 19 times in the Quran. However, the full name Rashad is only mentioned twice, and both of them in one chapter, chapter 40. Interestingly, the context in which Rashad's name is being mentioned is between a long conversation between Pharaoh and others, one verse before the first mention of Rashad's name. Verse 40, 28. A believing Egyptian among the people of Pharaoh asked him, "Why would you want to kill a man who is telling you to worship God alone? If he is a liar, then it is on him. If he is telling the truth, then you benefit from what he says." This is the first reassurance to us to not be so defensive when it comes to Rashad being a messenger. What did Rashad preach? To worship God alone. So here is God reassuring us that if there is a false messenger we believe, but this messenger tells us to worship God alone, and we obey him, we will not be faulted. But if this person is truly a messenger and we disobey him, then we have committed a crime against God and became a disbeliever. So this verse is serving as a reassurance and as a warning. You have nothing to lose by following Rashad if he was a false messenger, but you have everything to lose if you don't follow Rashad and he was a true messenger. Mind you, this verse here is right before the first of two mentions of Rashad's name in the Quran. Coincidence? Also interestingly, between the only two verses which contain Rashad's full name, verse 40, 34, mentions people doubting Moses being a messenger because they said Joseph was going to be the last messenger, perfectly mirroring the issue people have with Rashad's claim of being a messenger. They erroneously assume Prophet Muhammad is the last messenger of God, just as people in this verse did. Mind you, this verse is between the only two mentions of Rashad's full name in the entire Quran, and coincidentally it talks about people rejecting a messenger because they thought another messenger would be the last. And then out of nowhere, this believing Egyptian in the Quran starts saying things that only messengers say in the Quran. He says, "O my people, follow me and I will guide you in the right way." The word right way in Arabic is Rashad. Again, this verse is using a well-known poetic device that juxtaposes past events with similar future events. This believing Egyptian is mirroring Rashad Khalifa, who was, by the way, Egyptian. Mind you, these verses are the only mentions of the full name Rashad in the entire Quran, and surrounding them. Coincidentally, it mirrors and hints at the modern issues and their past correlate so well. People will claim a previous messenger was the last messenger. The believing Egyptian out of nowhere starts going off character and acting like a messenger, as if mirroring Rashad Khalifa. This is a major hint from God. What more do you need? If this doesn't settle the deal with you, then what? It's okay to feel apprehensive at first. It's okay to be skeptical at first. All the information posted in this video is easily verifiable. Please research them yourself. So what should you do at this point if you remain uncertain because of that apprehensive feeling? Turn to God alone. Pray to God alone. Say, "Oh God, please lead me to the right path. Wherever you lead me, whichever path is your path, I will take it. Please guide me to the right direction, wherever it is, and help me do right by you." This prayer is independent of any religion. If you find this too cringeworthy, or you felt some kind of animosity after hearing this prayer, then perhaps you have rejected God in your heart or you have rejected God's signs in your heart. And maybe God has determined you are not worthy of guidance because you can't even garner up the humility to genuinely ask him for help regarding this matter. If you like this video, please like and subscribe for future videos. Join our Discord, link in description, where we have 24/7 live conversations. Please drop by, ask any questions or leave any comments. We welcome new members of all backgrounds or religious beliefs. We also have a podcast, Quran Talk, and a Quran study app, link in description, you can download. Thanks for watching.